Hi, I'm Andre Koen. I want to say welcome to this discussion on uh, workplace engagement. So, how do you make sure that you have an engaged workforce? Well, first, you align everything to your values, right? So, we make sure that we keep a value focus. But before we get to that, I do want to encourage us to think about this notion of what it means to be whole, right? And an example that I like to use in a number of Native communities use the medicine wheel that you see here. My family happens to be a Assiniboine, which is a piece of the Sioux Nation that kind of dips down from Canada into Montana, and so my family is my wife and my daughters are a member of that nation, and so. We oftentimes talk about this idea of balance, right? And so, first, land acknowledgments. We recognize that the land that we stand on here in the United States, this digital space, even, is originally belonged to Native peoples, and so that's important for us to kind of recognize. The thing that I wanted to really focus on is that even when we think about this notion of a wheel, that wheels oftentimes work best when they are balanced, and so this notion of being a balanced individual, recognizing, being cognitive about your mental acuity, your spiritual development, your emotional intelligence, and making sure that your physical body is in line with your spirit, it becomes really important, right? So this notion of dis-ease means there's a breach, right? Some kind of anxiety there. And so when we think about these things, I really want us to think about this notion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and give some perspective to that. So, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's physiological safety. There is this just notion of psychological safety, the sense of belongingness, esteem, knowledge, aesthetics, self-actualization, and transcendence. And First Nations perspective really is about self-actualization. So the starting point is much higher and also seems to be inverted from Maslow's hierarchy. And then there's community actualization. So the individual now can work within communities to make sure that the community is self-actualized, and then that perpetuates the community in moving forward. And so when we think about this notion of perspective, one seems to be very individualistically focused while the other is very collectively focused. And neither is wrong. They are both different approaches to answering the same question, right? Or addressing the same question, which is, what is it that people are after? That is the essential question. What is the root of motivation? Why do people do what they do? And one what I suggest is that people are looking for safety, significance, and belonging. Safety, that physical, psychological, intellectual, spiritual safety that allows people to give their significance, right? And significance is your purpose, your ability to provide resources, your mere existence is significant, right? And then lastly, is the sense of belonging, that we want to be in relationships with people who understand our significance, and we want to be safe in being in those relationships. And so when we think about these roots, this becomes really important because it allows us to think about diversity in a different kind of way. And so when we think about diversity, what I really would like for you to think about is commonalities and uniqueness simultaneously, right? So with these plants, there are some universal things that these plants need. They universally need a growing medium. They universally need sunlight. They universally need water. However, given their uniqueness, they need water in a particular kind of way, in a special way. They need to be treated as an individual while simultaneously being in the plant family, right? So those things are important for us to recognize, that diversity is about uniqueness and commonalities. which then leads us to thinking about values in a different kind of way. So instead of thinking about values as good and bad, we need to think about them as being effective and ineffective. So if I have a value, if I have a behavior, if I have even a mindset, and it is not leading me to my goal, it is ineffective, thus needs to be changed, needs to be augmented. There's something about it that needs to I need to recognize, right? And so what that means is if there are individuals who are getting what they want, are achieving their goals, then there's not much I can do to help them, right? But for those folks who want to change, who want something different, there's an opportunity for that to happen. And so one of the things that I oftentimes ask in some of my sessions is, what does covering cost us? So many folks talk about the fact that they have to augment something about themselves to either accentuate or diminish their uniqueness so that they can fit into their organization. And I would say that comes at a cost. And for some of us, the cost is higher than in others, but we all have a cost. And so what is lost when we have to cover or diminish ourselves or augment ourselves to fit into a particular workplace? We lose talent. We lose creativity. But when we create an inclusive environment, there's so much that we gain, right? So we gain gains in discretionary effort. We gain gains in loyalty, right? We get and productivity goes up, right? So all of these things are things that we gain. So then there's this question of, can you have wrong values? Now, given what I just said, one could probably guess what I would say about that is that no, you cannot have wrong values. And people will say, well, what about those people who hate other people? Those people who want to destroy other people? You're saying, Andre, they don't have wrong values? And I would say, yes, they don't have wrong values. What are they after? They are after safety, significance, and belonging. What is the problem? Because that's what I'm after too. So the problem isn't in the values that they have, it's in the behaviors or the definitions that they have about those values, right? So looking for safety, significance, and belonging is noble. It is human. It is a part of what we do. But the methods that we use have to be questioned. And so are those methods effective or ineffective? Are they leading us towards our goals, or are they leading us away from our goals? And I would say from an organizational standpoint, if you have goals other than what the organization has, then you are off purpose, right? And then lastly, there's this notion of do we have different values? And I would say we don't have different values. We have oftentimes different meanings. We have different methods of achieving those values. And if we recognize that we're all after very similar things, then we can negotiate those so-called differences, right? The illusion of difference becomes something that we can negotiate. And so how do we keep this going? Through lifelong learning. So why is lifelong learning important? Because it keeps us motivated towards the future. It allows us to be curious. It allows us to continually adapt to our context, because our context is constantly changing. And it also allows us to focus on our physical nature. And so what we know is that we are not a divided being, that we are a whole being. And so our physical, our mental, our spiritual, our relational aspects are all connected. And so it's important that we figure out ways to make sure that we are whole, because when we are whole, then we have the resources to share with others. We have the resources to provide with other people and share. And so it becomes important that we take care of our physical body, because it is the house in which all of our other aspects of our identity can live. And then it's also important to make sure that we're having right relationships. And what right relationships are is relationships that are mutually beneficial, that what's good for you is also good for me. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work to build those types of relationships. And so it becomes important to engage in that process. And lastly, how do we do all of this stuff? We have to be critical thinkers. We have to keep this in the front of our minds. Otherwise, we put ourselves in a position where we're not thinking. And so then that's where this unconscious bias, this microaggressions, this misalignment of our intention and our values and our behavior happens when we're not thoughtful. And so it becomes extremely important for us to engage in critical thinking as we continue these conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is Andre Koen. I want to say thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing who you become as we continue these conversations. Have a great day, and I'll see you later.